In the shadows of history, beneath the stories of knights and kings, lies a forgotten chapter, one of blood, fear, and human suffering. For centuries, an unspoken slave trade raged across Europe, a trade that targeted the people of the Slavic lands, giving birth to the very word we know today, slave. Who were these victims? Why were they sought after? And what forces drove this brutal industry that spanned from the shores of the Black Sea to the bustling markets of the Islamic world? Join us as we unravel the dark secrets of the Slavic slave trade, uncover the truth about its hidden impact on world history, and explore the lives forever changed by this forgotten atrocity. From the forgotten raids of the Vikings to the powerful merchants of the Ottoman Empire, the story of white slavery is more complex and more harrowing than you ever imagined. What was the real scale of this trade? How did it shape the fates of nations? And why is it so rarely spoken of today? This is the untold history of the Slavic slave trade. The term white slavery historically refers to various forms of exploitation, but it is sometimes misunderstood or misused in discussions about the history of slavery. One important aspect of this topic is the historical Slavic slave trade, which was a significant element of slavery in medieval Europe and beyond. Slavic slave trade. The word slave itself derives from Slav, reflecting the deep historical connection between the Slavic peoples and the institution of slavery, particularly during the early medieval period. From the 9th to the 14th centuries, many Slavic people were captured and sold into slavery. The key players involved in the Slavic slave trade included 1. The Vikings. During their raids in Eastern Europe, the Vikings captured Slavic people and sold them to the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and elsewhere. 2. The Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine economy had a significant demand for slaves, many of whom came from the Slavic regions. This was both for domestic servitude and for use in the military and agricultural labor. 3. The Islamic caliphates. The Islamic world, especially under the Abbasid Caliphate, had a substantial demand for slaves, and Slavic slaves were traded into the Islamic world via routes through the Khazars and other middlemen along the Black Sea. And 4. Central and Eastern European lords. In Eastern and Central Europe, various powers, including Hungary, Poland, and the Holy Roman Empire, were involved in the capture and trade of Slavic people. Key routes and mechanisms. Slavic slaves were trafficked along well-established routes from Eastern and Central Europe to various markets. Firstly, the north-south trade route. Slaves were transported from the Kievan Rus and surrounding regions via the Dnieper River down to Constantinople or Byzantium and the Mediterranean markets. Secondly, the trans-Saharan route. Slavic slaves also made their way into the Islamic world through North Africa as part of the broader medieval Islamic slave trade. And thirdly, the Black Sea and Caspian Sea routes. These bodies of water facilitated the movement of Slavic slaves into the Ottoman Empire and Islamic states. Who were the slaves? Slavic slaves were typically captured during wars, raids, or as part of punitive expeditions. The vast majority were prisoners of war or civilians caught in the crossfire. They were of varying social statuses, from peasants to members of the lower nobility, and were enslaved in both Christian and Islamic territories. Many slaves were forced into agricultural labor, domestic service, and military service. Some were also sold into prostitution, which links to the concept of white slavery being tied to forced sexual exploitation in certain historical contexts. Evolution of the slave trade. The demand for Slavic slaves diminished over time due to several factors. First, the Christianization of Slavic peoples. As the Slavic regions were gradually Christianized from the 9th to the 13th centuries, the practice of enslaving fellow Christians became less acceptable, particularly in the Christian West. Second, the rise of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman conquest of the Balkans and parts of Eastern Europe shifted the dynamics of the slave trade, with more non-Slavic populations, for example, from the Caucasus or Central Asia being targeted. And third, the shift to the African slave trade. By the 15th century, the focus of European slave traders had shifted to Africa, with the Atlantic slave trade becoming the dominant form of human trafficking by the 16th century. Modern misuse of the term white slavery. In more recent times, particularly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, white slavery became a term associated with the forced prostitution of European women, often conflating economic migration, sex work, and exploitation. The term was used in campaigns to combat human trafficking and forced prostitution. It's important to distinguish these two uses of the term to avoid conflating historical forms of slavery with modern abuses. Conclusion. The Slavic slave trade was a significant part of early medieval European and Middle Eastern history, influencing the economies and societies of a wide geographical region. While the term white slavery has evolved and been used in different contexts, the history of Slavic slavery offers a compelling reminder of how deeply embedded the institution of slavery has been in human history, transcending race, geography, and time periods.